You said that your dad, Don Cash, is not teaching me the transformation within. He helped me find myself.
My life changed dramatically with his passing, and I became someone I like being. He'd already been in sales. He'd already done well with sales. What if I could do the 7 summits, the highest summit on every continent? And so he started in, I think, 2014 and hiked the highest summit on every continent. He wanted to do something that was making him live, not just survive, not just succeed in kind of that temporal sense, but live. He did Antarctica, and that was kind of his test for the cold. He did Mount McKinley, and he lost a couple fingertips there. So I think that was kind of the background. He struggled with that for a while. He was mad with God. He was mad, with different things, and kind of struggled spiritually for a long time. He was prepared. We feel like he did his homework. He studied Everest for a long time, and we followed his little dot of his satellite phone, and we saw this little dot get to the top. And then in the morning, my mom called me and said, I haven't heard anything. He should be back by now. It's been a long time. He was in the death zone.
Yeah.
And I just said, Mom, I really feel like something was wrong. And then soon after that, she got the call that he wasn't okay, that he hadn't made it back to Camp 4, and that he had collapsed on the summit and then collapsed again on Hillary Step. And so they just hooked him to the side of the mountain, and that's where he still is. So we still get pictures sometimes of his body.
Brandi Cash, welcome to the Roller Coaster Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
We're going to talk about a lot today, but one of the main stories that we're going to talk about today is a story about your father, who in 2019 decided to leave his job as a software salesman and hike in Mount Everest, and unfortunately didn't have probably the outcome that he or you, the rest of his family, wanted. And so we're going to talk about that today on the show. We're going to talk about your job, what you do for clients, which is called intuitive healing, which is helping clients work through trauma through different modalities. And I just personally am really grateful that you're coming on, because I personally went through an experience about 1.5 years ago that was very traumatic. And I've had to, I've spent 18 months just trying to figure it out, and I feel like I've finally gotten to a place that's good, but it's like, is there a finish line to some of this stuff? So I want to talk about that, or is it just a constant, never ending battle? Right. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Brandi, I think to dive in, I'd love for you to describe, in whatever way that you want, the events of your father, Don, deciding that he was going to climb Everest, and sort of what led up to that decision, and then him ultimately, starting the hike.
Yeah, thank you. I think the first thing that is important to note is that his brother passed away in 2013, and he was a big influence on my dad. He was just younger than him. And when that happened, it was something that he realized he needed to live life differently because of that death, because of that close someone that wasn't here anymore. And so he kind of went on this journey of really wanting to find who he was and what he really wanted out of life. He'd already been in sales. He'd already done well with sales and with financially, all of that, but that he wanted to do something that was making him live, not just survive, not just succeed in kind of that temporal sense, but live. So I think that was kind of the background. He struggled with that for a while. He was mad with God. He was mad, with different things, and kind of struggled spiritually for a long time. And then he had this idea. I think he met with a few people that had done the 7 summits, and he just had this idea planted of, what if I could do the 7 summits, the highest summit on every continent? And so he started in, I think, 2014 and hiked the highest summit on every continent. He wasn't a huge hiker before. He liked being outdoors, but I don't think he was an avid hiker by any means. But he really loved this idea of going and traveling and accomplishing something big on each continent. So he did all of them, and Everest was the last one. He actually quit his job twice. He was able to work out a way to replace his own position and quit a job twice to be able to do these mountains. They didn't necessarily want him doing them.
Yeah.
So he did Antarctica, and that was kind of his test for the cold. He did Mount McKinley, which is Denali, and he lost a couple of fingertips there. Yeah, just from the frostbite. And again, not a lot of, wasn't sure if people thought he was just kind of crazy to go for Everest, but he felt like each of those mountains prepared him to face what was on Everest, which was the cold, the elevation, obviously, and just needing the persistence. So he was so much more himself during this time that our family just saw a different side of him that wasn't kind of like in the drudgery of making money and trying to, make himself happy with things.
Yeah.
It became something that was more real. That was him really living life. And so when he wanted to do Everest, there was no pushback from our family. We just saw how happy he was and how fulfilled he was. And so sending him there was not hard for us at all. And he was positive. He was excited. He felt like he had trained well. He would set up a ladder in the backyard between two chairs and practice going over in his big boots, these where you would cross the crevasses. And that's how he trained. That was his biggest worry, was the ladders.
Yeah.
So he was prepared. We feel like he did his homework. He studied Everest for a long time. He had every book and movie and everything on Everest. And that was a goal that I don't know that he realized he had until it was part of the 7 summits. And that was his crowning summit. So we were super excited. We were, we had a blessing for him before he left. And my brother blessed him that he would summit, which he did. And we followed his little dot of his satellite phone. He actually sent it out on Facebook. So he had a lot of people following his journey as he went up and down the mountain. You have to acclimate quite a bit. So you go up and you stay, go back all the way down. And we were just kind of watching as he summited. So we saw this little dot get to the top, and then it would freeze every once in a while. So we weren't sure if it was, a connection issue or if he hadn't come down yet. So we got a call. That was an evening when we saw that. And then in the morning, my mom called me and said, I haven't heard anything. I don't know, he should be back by now. It's been a long time. He was in the death zone for a really long time. Again, a slow hiker, but very persistent.
Yeah.
And then she just said, I'm worried. And I just said, Mom, I really feel like if something were wrong, we would have a feeling about it. I think we would feel like something was wrong. And I don't feel anything. I feel peace. I slept great. I'm not worried about him. And then soon after that, she got the call that he wasn't okay, that he hadn't made it back to base camp, or to Camp 4, and that he had collapsed on the summit and then collapsed again on Hillary Step, which is not even very far from the summit. And when we heard more of those details, it was thinking that maybe there was a cardiac arrest that happened on the summit.
Yeah.
He had 2 Sherpas with him. He had a pair of brothers, actually, that were his personally hired guides to make sure, because he knew he was a little slower. He knew he was a bigger guy. And so they revived him at the top, and then he got down to Hillary Step and they weren't able to revive him when he collapsed there. And because of the terrain, because of the elevation, it was actually more dangerous for them to try to get his body off. And they also couldn't let it go because there was, Camp 2, I think, is underneath Hillary Step. And so they just hooked him to the side of the mountain, and they knew he had gone, and they were able to salvage some of his equipment for some other people that needed it.
Wow.
And that's where he still is. So we still get pictures sometimes of his body as it kind of is weathered on the mountain. It's frozen to the mountain, and the coloring is a little bit weird. It's kind of strange to see a body in any sense, but to know that that's your father is a little bit weird.
Wow. That's crazy. Because of how cold it is up there, the body is not going to deteriorate.
Right. It's just preserved.
Wow. Does anybody in the family have a desire to try to go and see his body?
I think they have a desire to do Everest. I don't necessarily think it's to see his body. I have a sister that would, I think, love to do Everest if it were ever something that she was physically, emotionally ready for, something that could really, really happen. I think she would love that. The rest of us, I don't think, have a strong desire.
It's
maybe
not
some of the other mountains
for 99.999% of people, right?
Yeah. And he would talk about the statistics, and he would joke about it a lot of, it's only 5% chance of dying on the mountain. And he would talk about green boots, which is another body on there that you can only see the boots. And he would make jokes often of like, I signed a waiver that if anything happens to me, like they're just going to send me down the mountain. But he was just so excited that there was, that risk was part of it, but it wasn't something that he was scared of. It was just, I know that this is obviously potentially life altering thing, but that he knew the risks, and he would talk about like, this is a calculated risk. If you don't have risk in your life, then you're not living.
Yeah. And
I believe that he did do his research, and he did study and understand the risk that he was taking, and that he would talk. So there was a video that we found after where he talks about how good he feels, and like everyone else is sick, everyone else is having these headaches or these different things. And he talks about how good he feels, and that his number one priority is to come home. And so getting that had uploaded before he lost service. And so we were able to get that video.
That's your last video of him?
Yeah. Yeah. And it was to us, it was to his family, and just talking about, I feel good, and you're my priority, which obviously with the events that happened, that's very comforting to have.
Yeah.
After.
Yeah, for sure. I can totally relate to him saying that, he understood the risks of, potential death or other people who don't die but get very, very sick up there. And kind of the parallel between taking risks and living, right? And one of my greatest passions is motorcycle racing.
Yes, he loved it too.
I race motorcycles that go 180 miles an hour around a track, right? And many people in my life don't understand it. They cannot understand why I would put my life in danger like that. I'm married, I have 4 kids.
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe, but it's the only place in the world where I feel alive.
Wow.
Truly alive and truly present, right? Because you have to be so focused on the task at hand, similar to hiking across a crevasse on a ladder, that everything else, space and time, does not exist, right? And there's not many moments in life where you get to experience that. So
yeah, I think that was actually one of his bigger motivations, without necessarily realizing it, was the meditative aspect of climbing those mountains.
Yeah.
There was no service. There was nothing you could distract yourself with. And it was him and his thoughts and his body, and
just
how
healing.
how he could push it.
Yeah. That's amazing. What did he do? What did he have to do to prepare for these hikes?
He would work out a lot. Like, he was a big weightlifter before he started doing mountains, and he had to kind of incorporate mountain training into his normal workouts. He did Bikram yoga, hot yoga. He would take a huge pack of like 70 something pounds and just hike. So there's a few mountains around Utah that are perfect for just a couple hour hike with a heavy pack. And he would do that pretty regularly just to train. And that was throughout the couple years that he was doing all of these mountains. So the mountains before, each mountain prepared him, I think, for Everest, but that was kind of his personal training. He was pretty disciplined with his exercise, which is awesome. And his mental fortitude obviously was a big part of that.
I'm having this very weird realization live on the show that I think I know your dad.
You might. There's something about you that reminds me of him, and I'm not sure what it is.
Oh my gosh, this is weird. Okay. Where did Don work?
Adobe.
What companies?
And Omniture.
Oh man. Chris Harrington and Josh are really good friends of mine.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe I didn't put that together before we met.
Wow.
Yeah, I've met Don. I know Don. He's like a legend. like a total legend in the tech. I mean, that's my whole background is tech. And this guy, for people who don't know who he is an absolute tech icon, not just in Utah, but generally. And I also I know the way that Chris and Josh have talked about him. I didn't know him obviously nearly as well as those guys did, but, they would talk about this guy being just an amazing dude, very dedicated, very good at what he did, right? He helped build Omniture from something that was very small to a couple $1 billion company, right? So that's amazing. Sorry that I didn't connect those dots. As you were talking about, I was just like, hold on. Yeah. And I had to go and look and see. So
yeah, I feel like he had kind of reached his summits in the tech world and in, sales, and he had built teams and he had done this inspiring work, but that he needed to challenge himself more personally. And I think on a more spiritual level too, mind and body and spirit. So, but that all was part of his larger than life aspirations.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I had John Pastana on the show. I had Chris Harrington on the show.
Wow.
I'm going to have Josh on too. And so
how cool is that?
That's wild.
That is wild.
I want to talk about, you, and I asked you this before the podcast, like, what do you call yourself, right? Because you help people probably just work their shit out, if that's a fair thing to say, right? Like we all have our stuff that we're going through. And a lot of it, I think, stems from, our childhood or past traumas, right? So, so you call yourself an intuitive healing coach, which I love that. And when I hear that, it makes me think you are actually using your own intuition to help other humans, men and women, understand like what's going on and how to get through trauma or work through trauma. So can you just share what is that work and why are you so passionate about it?
Yeah. So I was going to school to be a therapist. That was my mom's career. I saw how she was able to help people really personally and one-on-one, and with school, like tools and skills that everyone needs. Therapy and mindfulness and meditation, I think, are things that everyone needs. And so going to school for that, looking into that as maybe family therapy, just kind of wanting to have the most impact for healing. And then while I was on that journey, I started learning about the power of the mind-body connection and just the realization that what we think about affects our bodies, and how our bodies function or don't function is something that we can learn from mentally and emotionally. That if we're holding on to something, even if we don't realize it, that our body will hold on to things. And that if you can get your body to release, if you can get your body to work something out, your mind has that much more freedom to let it go. And that it goes both ways. Sometimes it's more of the mental. We have to kind of bring it up consciously. Sometimes it's more the subconscious or the body kind of doing the healing work. But my belief is that your body wants to heal, your mind wants to heal, and that you just have to have the right, find the right tools for you of letting that out. And that a lot of it is kind of the same principles we learned from ages, ancient times of, feel it to heal it. Let your body go through this, feel into these hard things. You can't rush this healing process. And that's a lot of what I find myself doing, is encouraging people to feel when we're so used to pushing it away or pushing it down or stuffing it into our bodies somewhere, where really it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to let it out. It's okay to let it come up. And that's what can be really healing with others and within ourselves. And then that kind of brings in more of the spiritual aspect, mind, body, and spirit. That is what it is to live. You have to have a connection to something greater than you to process these things, and to know that life is serving you, that it's meant for you, that you're gaining from it, that it's not something here to beat you up and tear you down, even though it can do that too. It's really building this deeper reservoir, this spiritual base.
Thank you to our sponsors over at Bucked Up.
I love this company. I love their products, their apparel, and their supplements. Recently, they dropped the mother of all pre-workouts, Mother Bucker. This is not for the faint of heart. This will make you want to claw your face off. So don't get stuck in traffic when you're headed to the gym. I love these guys. I love this company, and I love their products. They are clearly the best tasting pre-workout on the entire market, and they're number one for a reason. Bucked Up is my favorite workout brand, hands down. And they also have my favorite apparel for working out and just for daily life. It's Lululemon-like quality, but for a fraction of the price that's affordable. So head over to their site, buckedup.com, where you can check it out. And for 20% off their entire site, use the code TylerHall20.
Well said. I think that there's probably, there's got to be hundreds of different modalities that people can explore, right, to work through this kind of stuff, right? So the ones that I'm familiar with would be like, and again, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, but the way my mind thinks about it is maybe more entry level or basic practices like meditation and using the Headspace app, for example.
Yes.
That feels like that's maybe the most basic form of working through some of this stuff. But then you have the whole spectrum of, breath work and kind of deep meditate, breath work journeys. And then you have plant medicine, you have ayahuasca, right? So you think of this spectrum of things that you can do. Do you feel like people can get to the same conclusion using different types of modalities?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's freeing to have lots that you can offer, but that every session is completely unique. Every person in their journey is completely unique. And to me, it's more, they will know what their journey is, what they need, what they're drawn to than I do. So a lot of the coaching that I do is also just encouraging them to listen to their connection. What do you feel drawn to? What books do you want to read? What podcasts do you feel inspired by and feel, a connection with? That my journey is uniquely mine. I loved mindfulness. I loved learning how to meditate, changed my life, and it still changes my life. And that's kind of my base for a lot of things, but psychotherapy is in there too. And then just learning different things about trapped emotions, held emotions in the body, and that there's easy ways to get those out, but that everyone will have their own things. There's EFT tapping, there's breath work, there's, deeper meditation, plant medicine. Like those are all something that if you're feeling called to it, that's your guidance, showing you the best way for you to go, not necessarily someone else being like, hey. But the fun thing about more alternative medicines is that there feels like a lot that can be tried, and that can get exciting because it's like, oh, I don't have to stick with, modern medicine or Western medicine. I can be open to an ayahuasca journey, or I can be open to, some other form of going within and finding what you're feeling guided to do.
Yeah. Amazing. One of the words that you used in there, I'm not sure I agree with from my personal perspective, which is you said there's easy ways to work some of these things out. The reason I say that is because, I hired a breathwork coach about 6 months ago, and I've probably done 6 or 8 sessions with her now. We've actually had her on the podcast, and
awesome.
Her name is Jen Cole. She's here locally. And it is everything but easy. From specifically my first time, my ego trying to tell me this isn't going to work. Don't do it. Like this bad voice in my head trying to, but then once you get there, it's like, okay, I'm surrendering. I'm going to commit. Then you realize the reason it's called breath work is because it's actual work. Like it's hard work the first 10 or 15 minutes to get into like these sort of breakthrough journeys, right? So do you actually believe that some of this stuff is easy, or is it maybe a little more difficult, but it's so worth it if you're willing to give it a try?
Right. I think I call it easy because after that initial shock of it, after that initial, I'm going to feel it instead of try to cover it up, then you start to realize that it's so much easier to live in a place of feeling and embracing and surrendering than it is to resist everything in life, and to resist this feeling and to resist that person and to not like this. And and that the ego is a lot harder to live in, even though an ego death is a really painful experience. And those breakthroughs are incredibly painful.
Yeah.
The relief behind them and the results behind that, it's just worth it. It's like, oh, how did I live my life with so much pain that I was choosing on some level?
Yeah.
When I could have been, feeling it and going to those depths and letting it transform me, because then you're a person that can handle those experiences instead of someone who's trying so hard to protect yourself all the time.
Yeah. Could we role play a little bit?
Sure.
Like if I was a client and I, came to you and, like in my case, the situation that my audience is really familiar with now is my wife had a complicated pregnancy related issue about 18 months ago. And she should not have survived it. And there was a few days there where it was pretty clear that she was going to pass away.
Wow.
And then she didn't, and she made it, but it was very tough. Right. And, at that time I was a pretty hard guy and I didn't show a lot of emotion, and I was just, and that changed me, right?
Wow.
It changed everything. It softened me. It made me a lot calmer, made me question the purpose of life. I went really deep on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So if I came to you with like sort of that type of trauma, like how would you work through this with a client?
Yeah, there's lots of different tools that I would use. So the first thing that I do when I see clients is I do what I call a tune in, which is just a chance to kind of let go of the mind. And like I have them tell me what their intention is for the session, and then we let it go and we kind of relax, breathe, take a minute. And then I'm just connecting with my own intuition, encouraging them to do the same.
Yeah.
That is, the more connected you are, the more we can get some real answers instead of what we think the answer should be or what, Brandi's brain has for them. It's I'm getting my guidance in my direction and I'm listening. And then that spiritual guidance, whatever you might call that, is what kind of leads the session for me. A lot of times what I find is I will dig into those pain points, because if, again, you're kind of pressing them down, trying not to feel them, then they're going to stay there. You're going to stay stuck in that. Whereas if we can have someone safe, sending you love, holding that space for you to just let it up, which is what you do in podcasts all the time, that is what actually heals the emotion. And you become the person that's gone through that instead of the person that's still holding it or still not fully transformed by that pain. And so it is hard, and a lot of sessions are painful for people, but there's such a relief that I've been through myself, but that I also see in nearly every session, that we get there. We get to that place of, I have a new understanding, or I'm actually stronger than this or than I thought I was. And we can actually move it out. So there's a few tools. There's, somewhere you can just like imagine the scene, imagine that traumatic event, remember everything you can about it, pull it up as a movie in your mind and play it through, and just everything you can think of, as painful and awful as that was. Ugh, right? Like no one wants to go back there, but you're literally going back there all the time on accident. Yeah. So being able to pull it up and say, I was terrified. I felt so alone. I didn't know if anything was going to be okay again. I didn't know how this was going to go. And you remember all of those details, you're really getting that emotional landscape open again. Then you end the movie when it's over, right? There's a point where it's like, I can't remember anything else. And that's kind of complete. Then you take a minute and you go back and you think of, if someone were there for me, if I had God, Jesus, angels, passed away grandmas, whatever that might be, if someone were there for me during that, how would this have played out? How would this have been different if I could edit them into this movie? And then you see what you learn and what you glean. For some people with sexual trauma, it's that they needed someone to protect them, that they weren't able to protect themselves, and they deserved to having someone who is there for them. Yeah. And that's what they give themselves, even if it's just imagining it. They give themselves that experience or that possibility. It could be I just needed someone to hold my hand. I needed to not feel alone in that moment. I needed someone to know, or I needed to know that it was going to be okay. And then you're rewriting that experience on an emotional level. When you use images, that's the language of the subconscious. That's why we dream. So when you can imagine it playing out differently, even though it didn't happen that way, you're helping your subconscious process that there could have been a different outcome, even though that's not what you went through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that gives you a little bit more freedom with the experience.
Are you familiar with Dr. Andrew Huberman? Does this name ring a bell? He's a neuroscience professor at the Stanford School of Medicine, and he has a podcast. I think it's like top 3 in the world now.
Wow.
It's gotten massive. And I'm like 7 minutes into an hour and 20-minute episode.
Wow.
That's about a meditative journaling practice to work through trauma.
Wow.
And the 7 minutes that I'm into, he has talked about, in order to do the practice, to start the practice, you sit down alone in a silent room. And for 30 minutes, you're going to think about the one moment in your life that was the most traumatic event that you've ever experienced.
Wow.
And you are going to write. And your hand should move the entire 30 minutes. And you're just going to write. And you're going to get all of it out on paper, right? So there's something, they've done there's like real scientific consensus around this practice and how it can help you work through trauma that is different than even saying it or imagining it or sharing it with somebody else. The actual practice of writing, or they say typing, but putting it down on paper is very powerful. So I'm going to finish it to see like what's next, right? After you do that, what's kind of the next steps and what should you experience through that process? But it reminded me of what you were talking about.
Yeah, I love that. There's a lot of techniques that we use with kind of release work is what we'd call that. Like just a way to get it out. Yeah. Thought dumping is what I've called it. But I love that idea of 30 minutes and setting down. And
I'll send you the full episode and you can see if it's, something that you would find.
I love that.
Beneficial. One thing that we often talk about with our guests is sort of original, unique perspectives. One of the ones that I think is original to you or unique is this thing called the scribble technique.
Yes.
What is that?
So it's a very similar idea. The idea is that when you're not actually conscious of what's really feeling, right? So putting down the words would be conscious thought, like this is how I'm feeling. A scribble is that same idea of there's emotion, there's something, there's energy here. And instead of having to figure out what words I'm using or what's really happening kind of in a conscious way, I'm just going to let my hand scribble it out. And that can work really well, especially for kids or for inner child type of work before verbal, right? Yeah. You just need to make a mess on a paper. You can use different colors. You can, do it for a different length. And eventually, when you have a strong intention of, I'm going to scribble out, this interaction that was really uncomfortable with my neighbor last week, whatever it is. And then you just let your hand do it. You think of that same idea of everything from the body going into that page. It will naturally start to make different designs. It might do like loops. It might just kind of soften or be a little bit more creative. Some people will start to draw or create something, but that's when you know that something has been worked out. Yeah. Really, really effective for people that don't necessarily want to know what the words are or what the thoughts are exactly. They just need to get the emotion out. Similar to physical activity, right? I just need to go running. I don't want to know exactly what I'm angry about or what's happening. I just need to get it moving and out of my body.
Amazing. What about the gut toaster?
This is so fun that you know these terms. So the gut toaster was something that came to me as I was very indecisive about things. Like I lived in my head for a long time and just kind of everything had to be a logical decision. I didn't feel like I could trust my heart or my body about things. And so the gut toaster developed as I learned to trust more of my instinct, which they talk about the 3 brains. We have our brain, we have our heart brain, and we have our gut brain. Yeah. And we know the gut brain is a lot about, a lot of our serotonin is produced in the gut. We know that gut health is huge in our moods. But we also know that this is a place of your instinct, that having a gut instinct about something, a gut feeling.
It's a library of previous traumas and experiences.
And
right?
even like instinct as far as animal instinct, right? That people can survive in wilderness situations when they listen here and they don't get panicked here.
Yeah.
And so the gut brain is a process of just taking an issue, a decision usually, and noticing the thoughts like, okay, I'm trying to decide if I should do this or not. Notice all the thoughts. Then you bring it to your heart. Notice all the feelings. These are all the feelings I have about this thing. This is why I want to do it. This is why I don't want to do it, whatever it is, right? And then bringing it down into the gut. And I like to imagine kind of like starting a fire and burning all of the files, all my thought files, all my heart files, everything I think and feel about it, and letting it actually purify what my real instinct is on that thing. Awesome. What do I actually want from that choice? Or what do I really want from this? And you just let it cook. You let it sit there for as long as it wants to, and you let it go. And then you trust that your body will pop the answer, just like a toaster, right? The answer will come back up. And it's just a chance to kind of let go for a minute while you have to, sit on something or simmer on something. But you're doing it from a place of trusting your instinct that when that answer comes back up, it's worked through all of the head stuff, it's worked through the heart stuff, and that answer will be something that's clear. It works really well.
What are your thoughts about, if you think about the head brain, the heart brain, the gut brain, which of those can we receive spiritual guidance through?
I think all three.
Really?
Yeah. Spiritual guidance to me, your body is very connected spiritually. We're not running our bodies right now. Your heart's pumping, mine's growing a baby. These are not things that we're consciously doing.
Yeah.
That something is doing that for us. Something is in charge, right? Something is working. Heart, I think, is similar. We're not in charge of making our heart feel good or feel bad. I do something and I feel something, right? Yeah. But that we're learning how to manage the interpretation of those. I think we can have definitely conscious thoughts of, this is what I think God is, or this is what I think the universe is made of, or how it, cares for me, or whatever it is. But using all of those, I think, are very receptive to guidance.
On the topic of spirituality, one of your original perspectives is called Christ-focused meditations. Mm-hmm. So, I know that certain people that do the same kind of work that you do are very against bringing Christ or God or religion into these sort of practices. So why did you choose to do that?
I think because there's a gap, and there doesn't need to be. Yeah. There doesn't need to be a gap in any religion. If it makes people feel better to say Christ consciousness, that's great.
Yeah.
That I believe in that. I believe in that openness. I think that's why meditation is something that people can relate to in all aspects of the world, is it's getting out of those constructs of what you think something should be, and it's getting to a place of not necessarily knowing, but believing it, right? That you experience it even if you don't know what it is. And I do believe that that's what Jesus did. He lived in that place of kind of non-attachment and very much a connection. He wasn't listening to others and their culture. He was very, very tuned in to his divine role and his divine mission, and that we all have that. We can all do that.
That's beautiful. Do you feel like there's anything that is Are there like depths to trauma, or is all trauma created equal?
I think there's absolutely depths. I think
so. Certain things would require a significant amount more work, time, effort.
Absolutely. That's part of why I didn't get into therapy, because I could see that therapy had a very heavy element to it. There was more of a psychosis aspect, whereas when I do more of my coaching, it's everyday people. It's people that are functioning overall in life, that have something, right? Whether it's that their relationship isn't going well, or that they want just more connection with themselves or with God, that I wouldn't say that I'm versed in psychoses, like schizophrenia, or kind of really heavy things that. And I think that a lot of that is from trauma, that there can be definitely layers of, someone being abused or neglected or something in childhood, I think absolutely carries with them. And that's tragic, but also, I also believe that they'll rise above it eventually, right?
Yeah,
Finding
for
the
sure.
right tools or the right people to help them, that they will make it through.
I have something that I want to say for the audience. I think that all of us need to work through something. And I think before this thing happened with my wife, this major trauma that I have in my life, I didn't think I had anything to work on.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was good. I don't need therapy. I don't need coaching. I don't need meditation. I don't need all this woo-woo. This is weird, And my thought is that I don't know if it's just because I'm now kind of going down this path of really digging and working on myself, but it feels like it's becoming much more widely accepted, and more people are like open to trying to work through things, even if they don't think there's anything there.
Absolutely.
Right. So do you agree with that? Do you feel like sort of everybody has stuff that they need to work through, whether they know it or not?
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, it's life, right? Like there's things that we're too close to see clearly. And that's when it's helpful to have a third party perspective or someone who's just a little bit more removed to shine some light on it. I do trades with people all the time because I can't see my stuff when it's this close to me. I'm triggered, I'm upset, I'm in a place where I'm not really myself. Yeah. And I just need someone to just shine some light or remember that I'm amazing as I am, or that they love me, right? Even when I'm in this place of not feeling like I love myself, or not feeling like I am handling a situation very well, or a relationship, or whatever it might be. So I think we all need that person or someone or people around us that can hold that remember who you are, remember what you really are, and that you're not this trauma. You're not this thing that's coming up for you. But I would say all of us have tricky things. But that's also kind of what makes life fun, right?
Yeah. This was a pleasure. I want to close with a quote that you said on your Instagram a while ago. I think it was a few years ago. You said that your dad, Don Cash, is not teaching me the transformation within. He helped me find myself. What did you mean by that?
Love that. I'm like, I said that?
You did say that.
My life changed dramatically with his passing, and I became someone I like being. And I became someone who was willing to go to those depths and transform through them. Yeah. I started wearing bright colors. He was always a bright colored kind of standout guy. And it wasn't necessarily for him. It was because that was me too. Yeah. And that his passing was a new birth for me. His death was something that gave me life, even though it was extremely hard. It was so hard. Yeah. And I had to go through those nights of just crying and feeling and letting it up. But every time that I did that, I would emerge a little bit closer to who I was meant to be, emerge a little bit more the person that I'm here to become and to inspire others to become because of that pain that we all went through with his passing. And we can choose to let it transform us, or we can choose to be defeated by it, right? And to struggle and to be heartbroken and angry and frustrated. Or we can just feel how hard it is and let ourselves go to that most lowest low to realize that everything in life is precious and everything in life is worth living. And that even just breathing, even just seeing colors and sounds and feels is amazing. That we have to let some part of us suffer to then realize that everything is magnificent. My whole life changed, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for it, as hard as it was. Yeah. He taught me how to live. Beautifully said, and I appreciate you coming on the show. Yeah, thank you.
And sharing, your story and the story of your father.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me open up about it.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's a wrap.